Jesse Hughes of Eagles of Death Metal was very, very, very interesting because we did that one in his house, and like midway through the episode, his cat decides to jump on top of this PA speaker that he has in his living room for his karaoke IG live streams, and just knocks this PA speaker into the TV, completely destroys the TV. You hear everything like this explosion, and during the middle of the episode, oh shit! Like, what do I do? Do I go help him? Do I go touch the cat? Like, what is this? And then, is the cat fine? And he went, cleaned up a little, and just sat right back down and jumped right back into it, like nothing had happened. And I'm still sitting there like, what? And he's like, yeah, because I was saying this, that, that. I'm like, oh, all right.
Hey, what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media. I hope you've been having a great week so far. I most certainly have been. Before we jump into today's episode, I'd just like to ask you to follow the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast on the podcast platform of your choice. But more than that, I'd also like you to rate it and write a review, because when you do that, more metalheads just like yourself will be able to discover the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast. And that will be something that I would truly appreciate. Now, in today's episode, I'm with one of the original metal and beer podcasters. It's crazy that it's taken me this long to get him onto the podcast, but I'm very stoked that I have. But more than that, we did a two-part crossover episode, and what you are listening to right now is the first part of that crossover. This is Vox and Hops episode number 258 with Eddy Torres of the RRBG Podcast.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm with Eddy Torres of the RRBG Podcast. Very stoked to be with you because you are basically the predecessor of what I do with Vox and Hops. So I was very much looking forward to hooking up with you and having a conversation with you. I'm stoked. Let's start with an easy question. How you doing, Eddy?
I'm good, man. I mean, all things considered, wishing I could go to a live show. I just yesterday had my anniversary of not going to a show, so feeling it a little extra this weekend. So I got like 6 drinks in front of me.
Most excellent. What was that last gig? I saw the post, so I know it is. And I honestly think that it was one of my last gigs too.
Yeah, I think they were one of the last tour packages to be on the road, but it was Cult of Luna, Intronaut, and Emma Ruth Rundle.
What a cool package. Eclectic.
What a great night overall. It was the first tour of Intronaut with a new drummer, which was interesting to me because, I mean, those are my homeboys. I mean, I've been there from day one with them, and it was odd to be like, let's see what it sounds like with someone new in the drum kit, but it was still great. You know, they're still a very talented band and super tight, so can't go wrong.
After that point, everything just obviously went to shit.
Yeah.
So not for them, but for
the world.
in general.
It's all their fault. I'm just kidding.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you coped with this glorious year of 2020, which is now behind us.
Well, man, I mean, 2020 was rough, obviously, for everyone. And I've had a lot of internal battles during this time, a lot of mental battles of what am I doing? I wanted to make the show grow because I figured this is a perfect time I started doing video during the pandemic. I didn't have video before. It was just audio. And I then, like 3 or 4 into them, I'm like, why wasn't I doing this before? What? Why was this? I'm so stupid. It's so much better having the video. But yeah, just trying to ramp up the episodes. I did some hanging out, which I shouldn't have done. I didn't catch the virus or anything, but I did end up, how do you turn down an opportunity to hang out with someone like a DJ Lethal? You know what I mean? Like, it was the pandemic, but I got an email and they're like, hey, come down to the studio, take some pictures, maybe do an episode. I'm like, yeah, okay. Fuck it. I'll wear a mask.
Yeah.
Let's go. And, thankfully I got out of there, no virus free. But I shouldn't have risked it anyway. It was I shouldn't have done that, but it was a good opportunity. So I did that, and just working on a number of different projects that I'm trying to get off the ground, and combating this desire to create with the depression of like, what for? Because of the pen, there's no point. Like, what are we doing? So yeah, that was 2020 in a nutshell. Sure.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you got through it. We're moving forward. Vox and Hops is all about hanging out with my metal friends, talking about their lives, music, and craft beer. You mentioned you have a whole lineup there, but what are we going to start with tonight, Eddie?
Well, I already have this open because I was drinking it as I was setting up, but this is a Carl Strauss and Modern Times collaboration, Mosaic Oasis IPA, and it is a 7%er, but I'm almost done with it, so I'm going to just probably plow through that real quick and then open up this Mother Earth Flawless Imperfection Hazy IPA, trying to represent some of the California brands now that I'm out here and not in Florida. I used
Very
to be
cool.
all about Florida beer, but I like the label on this one. It's pretty nice, right?
It is cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I have a lot of beer stories. 8 years in the industry, if you want to talk about beer.
We're definitely going to talk about beer.
Mm.
On my side, I'm going to be enjoying a Kahnawake Brewing Company's. This is their Minotaur, and all of their can art is always
Cool.
mythological beasts. And I've actually never had this one, I don't think. This is a 7% as well. Hazy IPA, a New England IPA. Shout out to Drew, their head brewer. He's an excellent human. I'm going to crack this. Let's talk about beer. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's start with your very first beer, Eddie. Do you remember the first beer that you drank?
Ooh, not craft, just any beer.
Any beer.
Heineken, and I was 8.
Wow.
My father used to run this illegal underground domino game that I used to serve beer at with his friends.
Really?
Yeah, he would. It was all him and his friends, and they would sit around smoking cigars, and I would come by and bring them Heinekens. And then, after a few trips back and forth, my dad's like, "You want to try it?" I'm like, "Yeah." Boop. I was like, "Gross. I hate it." And I hated beer for a very long time because of that. Like, that first sip was disgusting, and it took me a while before I was like, you know what? I guess, whatever. Let's have a beer with my friends. And but I went straight to booze as a teenager.
Okay.
Like I skipped beer and I went straight to booze as a teenager. So started breaking into my dad's bar and taking sips of like different boozes and then refilling the bottle with water so he wouldn't notice.
Here he is on his nights that he's digging in there, thinking that his tolerance is just getting that much stronger.
Like, man, I'm really gotta stop buying this brand. They've gone downhill ever since.
When you did return to beer, what was that reason? What brought you back to beer?
The band, being in a band. Honestly, meeting a bunch of dudes that were, all like-minded, and we were just hanging out, making music and drinking, and they were drinking shitty beers at the time. It was like Old E and, King Cobra, whatever we can get our hands on at the time. But as the band started kind of maturing and touring and going around the U.S., we started discovering different beers. And, I think one of the first craft beers that poked out was Omegang Three Philosophers. That was like one of the first that I saw. I'm like, what the fuck is that? That's crazy. And it's really heavy, and like percentage is super high. Like, then from there, just kind of, Victory Golden Monkey and
Oh yeah.
Asheville was really like the peak of the craft beer for me, because that's where we just, that's where I started drinking them. And yeah, coming back to Florida, I remember we saw on one of our tours in Tampa, we went to a bar and they had Cigar City High Ally. And I took a sip of that, and the whole band, really, everybody fell in love. We're like, what the fuck? This is one of the best beers I've ever had. And then it became an obsession. That's when it went from, we're just a band drinking beers to, oh wait, there's a whole culture here. There's a, local scene, and it's almost like musicians. They're doing these local shows and stuff and doing everything independently. And I just fell in love with the thing.
Absolutely. And I mispronounced High Ally for quite some time.
You're not alone, dude. I worked for Cigar City for 2-something years, maybe, and before that, I was selling them as a distributor. And every single time, can I get the Jayalai? Or it's to the point where it became a beer. Like they did a Jolly Ollie because that was one of the weirdest pronunciations we had heard, and we're just like, really? How do you get to Jolly Ollie? Like
that's when when my bassist gets really drunk. It becomes Jolly Ollie.
Yeah, right.
No, we all know he becomes Elo. Anyone that's listening understands
Elo.
That. This is great. This has got some monster haze going on.
I see that.
Super tropical.
I'm going to open up this Mother Earth now with you and pour it into this awesome limited edition Mastodon McKellar glass.
Hell yeah. That's a gorgeous, gorgeous haze there too.
Yeah, not bad, right? And, it has a little Mastodon McKellar stuff on the back.
Hey.
Mosaic. That's like right out the bat. I like it. It's juicy.
Love Mosaic.
Pineapple-y. This one was good too, by the way. I didn't say anything, but it's nice and tasty. Mosaic too, but more on the oniony side, and this one's more on the fruity side.
Interesting. Very cool. I got Citra, Simcoe, and Mosaic going on in mine over here. Yeah.
And I know probably somebody's listening going, oniony. Like, yeah, there's a little onion quality to Mosaic hops, depending on how much they use.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. I always say Citra, there's a farty quality.
That's why I chose Citra as the hop of choice for my beer at Cigar City. So back in the days, I sat around with Wayne Wombles, who's our head brewer at Cigar City, and I told him, like, look, we have this beer that we did temporarily called Hopped in the High Seas.
Love it.
And it was a series where they were producing beer in Puerto Rico and like bringing it over in boats to Florida, just to get more production out of it and to provide them with work and stuff. And they were hopping it while it was on the cruise ship.
Really?
Or not on the cruise ship, but whatever, the ship. I'm making up words. But yeah, they would hop it, and that's what it was called, Hopped in the High Seas. They would hop it as it's coming over. And then we did a series where like each one was a different hop. Pale, it was Hopped in the High Seas Citra, Hopped in the High Seas Mosaic, whatever. And I told Wham, like, dude, we need to make that beer here on a permanent basis and just do the Citra one all the time. And so he was like, oh, that's a good idea. And we sat there and we went over different flavor profiles or whatever. And then a bunch of emails back and forth with, Joey Redner, the owner, and Wayne, just like, what are we going to do? What, different flavor profiles. And then eventually trying to pick the name, which the original name was going to be Libertad, which is freedom. Yeah. But apparently we didn't know that copyright kind of goes in different languages. So we couldn't do it because of Anchor. You know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that's weird. I guess it makes sense that, copyright translates, but yeah, so when we had to go with something else, I wanted to name it something Cuban. So Guayabera ended up being the Joey actually came up with the thought of having the shirt with the 4 beers, 4 cans of beer on each pocket because there's 4 pockets. So I was like, oh, that's a cool name, and we just went from there. But the beer ended up becoming like their second best seller in the company. It's insane.
That's all thanks to you because of your love of the fights.
Oh, I have nothing to do with it, according to some folks. I'm not going to drop any names. Some people are like, oh, you had nothing to do with it. Oh, okay. All right. I see you.
Let's dance into the soundtrack of your youth. Growing up in your parents' or guardians' house, what music was playing when you were not in control of the radio? What music did your parents or guardians listen to?
It was a constant battle between my parents, my mom and my dad, and it was they had a few things that they would listen to together, like the Bee Gees or the Boney M's, a lot of disco. But my dad would also dabble in like the Led Zeppelin and the Pink Floyd. So, I liked hanging out with my dad because he was obviously listening to Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd as opposed to, I still like Boney M and Bee Gees. They're great. But I don't know, there was like a certain edge to listening to Led Zeppelin instead. And then he also introduced me to, like Phil Collins and Huey Lewis and the News, Lynyrd Skynyrd and Steve Miller Band, and just a bunch of other, in Cuba, where he was from in Havana, he got arrested for listening to that music because
Wow.
apparently it was illegal to listen to American music because it was
Mm.
the enemy.
Hmm. There could
So
be
yeah,
like subliminal messages going on.
right, yeah. They're teaching these people about democracy. How dare they? And being
Hmm.
free.
Hmm.
Mm. But yeah, that slowly started evolving. The last thing I remember listening to with my father was Metallica, and that was me introducing it to him more than him showing it to me. And we've always had that relationship. Like he and I are not really in great speaking terms. Like we talk, but there's issues there. But we still the one way we do communicate is that we keep sending each other music.
Oh, I
Like
love that.
he'll email me something like check this band out, and it's like, oh, okay, check this out, and I reply with something else. So yeah, a lot of classics, and then I just started discovering like heavier metal as I went, through my high school years and beyond.
I love that. What is the most recent thing that your dad has sent you?
Oh, he's into like really like beach style. Um, I don't even remember the name right now, but it's like it's pop music, but it's like beach pop music where it's just kind of relaxing. We're outside. There's like like an R&B type beat behind it, and really nice melodic vocals. You know that he's living his dream right now out in Mexico, just living on the beach
Ah,
every day. So like that's a perfect vibe for him musically. And then I'll try and cater to that. Like, okay, you like that? Try listening to The Weekend. Here's this song and
mm,
this song, and he was like, oh wow, this is really good. I'm like, there you go. So I'll still try to every once in a while throw a heavy track in there, but he's like, that's too heavy for me. I can't do it.
there's no more ballads in metal.
Yeah, I mean, if you get the deeper you get and the more the nerdier you get with metal, you start seeing because all my friends that don't listen to metal, they think it all sounds the same. It's all just white noise,
Hmm. Yep.
It's a wall of distortion. So
Yeah.
it's crazy.
There's a finesse to it though.
Yeah, there's layers, and I try to explain it to them. I'm like, come on, man, there's like classical music in there. Listen, yeah, just imagine the distortion is off and listen to the notes. And
It's classical music. I say it all the time.
yeah,
It's the closest linked music to classical music for sure. How about those first shows? Do you remember the first show that you went to go see, Eddie?
yeah. I always tell I've said it before on the podcast, but like Huey Lewis and the News in Vegas, I believe, was one of the first ones, and Steve
Vegas.
Miller Band. Yeah, they did a killer set, and then they did an encore set a cappella. It was
Oh,
insane. Yeah, I was a little kid, but I was stoked because my dad would play Huey Lewis every day, so it was like, oh, those are the dudes that you play all the
that's so
time.
cool.
Like, so I remember being really stoked about that, and then I saw Pink Floyd in '92.
Wow.
Pulse tour, I think it was, in Jersey. I went to Woodstock in '94.
That's badass.
Yeah, and I was a little kid. I've just been
Yeah, that's
lucky that
badass.
I've been able to do all that crazy shit.
Very, very cool. How about your first time on stage?
My first time, shit. So right out of high school, I started doing like a garage band, covering Metallica songs,
Mm.
and
That was the first love.
yeah, and we would do just Metallica songs, no originals at all. And we would have people come over to the garage, just like 15, 20 people would show up, and we would just play Metallica songs, and everybody would just have a good time. And then that grew into Deftones songs, and then doing the same exact thing, just people come over, da da da. And then I joined a band. I joined this band called Stoma for a bit in Florida. It was kind of like a Mike Patton type project, pretty cool, weird sounds and keyboards and blatant rip off of Mike Patton vocals.
What Mike Patton, like a Mr. Bungle, a Tomahawk?
Kind of a mix of Bungle and Tomahawk, yeah.
Awesome.
And then really silly lyrics sometimes, like ooh just
Yeah,
making.
yeah, yeah. You know I did
Uh,
that too, right? So yeah.
yeah. So, so did that, and the first big band I would say I was in was Dissever, which in 2006 was like our first big show. Like we got together and jammed for a while in the garage and stuff, and then one dude approached me. He's like, "Who do you want to open for your first tour?" And at the time, I was like super obsessed with this band 3.
Yeah, yeah, they rock.
Yeah, and I told him, like, if you can get the band 3, that would be awesome. And he called like the next day, like, got him. I'm like, what? So we opened up for 3 in Miami at some like art gallery thing. That was kind of weird, but it was incredible. And the show was packed by the time we played, and then by the time we were done, people started leaving, and three played in front of like half an audience, which kind of pissed me off. I'm like, this was supposed to be their show that I'm opening up. And so that was the first time ever on like I would say official like stage opening up for a band, that I respected, and it just kind of grew from there with Dissever for 10 years. Pretty fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I thought you were going to say Churchill's.
Churchill's ended up becoming our home after a while. We did a few shows on our own here and there, but we were like, it's a piece of crap, shithole, but it's our shithole. You know what I mean? Like, that's our shithole. And then we had a deal with the door guys where it was like, you guys keep the bar money and we'll take the door. And they loved that deal because we would pack the house and everybody was alcoholics. So, and then, it was beautiful because I was working with Cigar City. So I started doing shows that were, tap takeovers.
That's so badass.
I'd sell like 10 kegs to Churchill's. We'll have a tap takeover, but then my band's playing in the background too.
Just killer.
It was fun, man. It was good times.
It sounds like a good time. I want to be there now. Well, maybe not the bathroom situation, maybe not, but
yeah, that bathroom is bad, dude. They filmed a porn in there.
No.
Yeah, you can look it up online. I'm not telling you to do it, but if you do it, you can Google Churchill's porn and you'll find it. It's pretty rough.
Oof.
I mean, I broke the sink in there once by mistake, but it was like right after a set. I felt like it was one of those extra intense sets where as soon as we were done, I felt like I was going to puke. I couldn't breathe, and I ran straight to the bathroom, and I lean on the sink. I'm like splashing water on my face, and just breaks right off into the ground. I'm like, oh, well, it was just shooting water up. I'm like, yeah, cool. And I just went back outside and kept drinking. I didn't tell anybody. Like, I told like one of my bandmates, I'm like, I think I broke the sink in the bathroom. He's like, there's a sink in the bathroom? I'm like, I guess not anymore. So
that's awesome. Let's talk about, RRBG podcast. As I mentioned, you are like one of the first people to do the beer and metal thing and interview format. How did this all start? Why do you have a podcast?
So this is an interesting one because I started it kind of as a joke, and my buddy Gasper and I and my guitarist Brian, we were all drinking. We would do these crazy bottle shares of drinking like 20 beers a night. It was just to explore different flavors and whatever. And Gasper's like, you've gotten this reputation because I would get hooked up with backstage tickets to go to shows because since I worked at the brewery, I would always bring beer to the shows. Yeah. So I'll hit up, Dave Whitty from Municipal Waste and bring a couple cases of Cigar City and just hang out backstage with him. And it was awesome. And my buddy's like, you're the rock and roll beer guy. You go to shows and you bring the beer. I'm like, okay, cool. That's funny. It's cheesy. But it's cute, I guess. So I went with it and just started the pod. I've always had an interest in I was a guest in a few of like my friends had podcasts. So I was like, let me be a guest. I'll just come shoot the shit. And I was a big fan of like Joe Rogan and all the other pioneers of podcasting and Corolla and all them. And I had just, it was like the perfect timing. I had just met Adam D from Killswitch. And met him at Cigar City during Hunahpu Day, and he was just there at the bar. Like, it was the day before Hunahpu. I'm sorry, but we were setting up for Hunahpu Day, so I'm there busting my ass, carrying pieces of metal and setting up tents and all this shit. And as I'm going in and out of the tap room, I see Adam D at the bar, and I'm like, oh shit, that's Adam D. And my boss is like, oh, we still need tents 6, 7, and 8 to be refilled with this, that, and the other. And I'm like, give me 1 second. I'll be right back. And I just walked over to Adam, like, are you Adam D? He's like, yeah. I'm like, big fan. He's like, you work here? I'm like, yep. He's like, I'm a big fan of you guys. I'm like, oh, great. Let's go to the brewery. I'll show you around. And took him to the back. I got in trouble because he was wearing flip-flops.
Yeah.
And
He's always wearing flip-flops.
yeah, and then my boss is like, "Why is he in flip flop?" I'm like, I can't. You tell him to take them off. You know, I mean, you go tell Adam D he can't wear his flip flops in here. I'm not doing that.
At least he didn't have his cape.
Right. So we hung out, talked shit for a while, and drank, and then we made a beer. I was like, "Hey, you guys should have a beer here." And I looked at my boss. I'm like, "Can we make a beer happen?" He's like, "Yeah." Boom. Let's do the beer. And for months and months, we talked about, again, the same thing, profiling a beer and what we're going to do. It was originally going to be like pine needles and cranberries or some weird shit.
Jesus.
It was going to be like Boston. I don't know. So we went away from that and just made it an IPA and a double IPA,
Sounds like a better seller.
Yeah. Like, cranberry and pine needles might be a little hard to convince people to jump into that. But yeah, so we did the beer, and it all kind of clicked at that moment. I'm like, I'm making beer collabs. I have this cheesy name that kind of is cheesy enough to work, and I've always wanted to start a podcast. So I just went out and bought the equipment, and I called Adam. Like, Adam, you mind? We announced the beer on my show. And he's like,
That's
"Oh,
so
you have a
cool.
show?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have a show."
Fake it.
I had no show. He was episode 1.
I love
and
that.
put it out into the world, and I just did it to announce the beer mainly, and then also to see, and it worked, and people loved it, and views blew up, and I'm like, oh well, now I got to do a second one. What do I do? And my boss at Cigar City is like, well, Dave Whitty.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Get Dave Whitty on. I'm like, oh, gee. All right. And I hit up Dave Whitty, and boom, I got him. And the original idea was to have a show where it was going to be a musician and a brewer, and it was going to be a 3-way conversation. And the first couple episodes are that. It's Adam D and David Castro in episode 1, and then Dave Whitty and Chris Bodges of Three Floyds was episode 2. And then it started getting way more difficult to coordinate, a brewer and a musician, 2 people whose schedules are already crazy, to have time to sit together and talk. So I just kind of became like, you know what, whoever can make it. So if it's just a brewer, then I'm talking to a brewer. And if I'm just talking to a musician, great. If I can do both, awesome. So so then it just became that, like, it'll be just musicians or just brewers. And then at one point, I just kind of like, I didn't want to pigeonhole the show. I felt like I was getting denials from people that I wanted to talk to, just like, hey, no, I don't drink beer, sorry.
Yeah.
Or hey, I'm not in a metal band or a rock band. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. I don't really care. I just want to talk to you. And so I decided to shorten the name. It used to just be Rock and Roll Beer Guy Podcast, and I just shortened it to RRBG. It's a little more vague. It still means the same thing, but it's not out there. The big problem was that a lot of the guests were having that if somebody Googles their name, now there's a Google search with their name and the word beer in it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a problem. But yeah, I don't know. I've been very lucky to, the success that the show's had people actually listen to it and care. And then like brands started hitting me up to like promote on the show. I'm like, sure, send me your product. I don't care. Yeah. And it started off as just getting free stuff and talking about it on the show to people offering money. And I'm like, all right, well, shit, now I got to take this serious. I'm getting paid. I got to up the production, up the, the graphics or whatever, and try to continue to have a quality of guests. Like,
oh yeah,
just to kind of keep the show interesting, because, people's attention span these days is hard to get. It's very quick and short, So I have a lot of friends in smaller bands that'll hit me up like, hey man, put me on the show. And like, I want to, but that's not going to help anyone. I guess having you on the show is going to be just for us to have a conversation. Like, don't expect being on my show to blow up your band. It's not going to happen.
Absolutely. I can definitely feel that.
Yeah.
Part of this going on. Absolutely. Let's talk about so you have an awesome roster of guests. You just got over the 200th episode, so congrats on that. It's a huge milestone. It's very, very, a lot of work goes into making a podcast. I know that. So congrats on that. You have a crazy roster, just huge stars, and that's because you have that level of quality that you're sticking to, and that's amazing. So talk me through some of your best memories, some of your favorite episodes, in case any of my listeners would like to go back and explore those ones. Your favorites.
Ooh, I mean, even as far back as episode, I think is 8 with Bron Daler from Mastodon was a particularly big one for me because I was a huge like fanboy Punisher, Mastodon Punisher, you know, and having it, you know, Dave Whitty actually hooked that one up. He texted Bron, was like, "Yeah, do the show." Like, oh, and what's funny is when I started the show too, like my wife she's very supportive, and she's like, make a list of the top 5 people you want on your show. And Braun was on the list, and with, you know, lo and behold, episode 8, which is like not that many in,
No.
I have already marked one off the list, and it was like whoa, and it ended up being really cool because Braun is a cool dude, so it was easy and fun and chatty, so that was a big one. Being invited to go hang out at the Melvins with Buzz was an experience that I would recommend everybody listen to. It's one of the episodes. Hanging out with Jesse Hughes of Eagles of Death Metal was very, very, very interesting because we did that one in his house.
Ooh.
And took cameras and my phone camera into his house, and it was he went off for a good hour, and like midway through the episode, his cat decides to jump on top of this PA speaker that he has in his living room for his karaoke IG live streams, and just knocks this PA speaker into the TV, completely destroys the TV. You hear everything like an explosion during the middle of the episode, and you know, I at the moment, and I was, you know, may or may not have been under the influence of one of my sponsors' products, Saints Joints, but yeah, I was smoking a joint, and when that happened, I had like a nervous breakdown. I'm like, oh shit, like what do I do? Do I go help him? Do I go touch the cat? Like, what is this? And then
is the cat okay?
Yeah, is the cat fine? And he went, cleaned up a little, and just sat right back down and jumped right back into it like nothing had happened. And I'm still sitting there like, what? And he's like, yeah, because I was saying this, that. I'm like, oh, all right. So it gave me an opportunity to like start exploring more comedy into the show, and like I did a couple like editing bits where I added some text and some like, you know, a picture or something, like, you know, we'll be right back. You won't believe what happened. And, and yeah, I've been trying to do that more, like maybe not during the episodes, but I've been working a lot on like my ads to make them not boring, because that's it's the least favorite thing for any podcast to me is to put up with those ads, and I always skip them. But I've been trying real hard to like make them somewhat interesting so that people don't skip them. You know?
Nothing. Yeah, you can't just read the text. You got to make it your own, and then make it even specialer, more special.
Do like I started doing bits with my wife now, so it's interesting. I'm trying to really up the sponsorship game.
Awesome, good for you. Good for you. How about an interview that got out of your hand? Something where you felt like you didn't have control anymore? An interview that you would like to redo?
Jesse Hughes of I'm just kidding. He kind of
stop the cat.
Yeah, no, he kind of took that episode over, like, and that's fine. I'm cool with that. Like, I like it when like I don't have to say anything because it's not about me. It's not really about me. It's about the guest. So it's cool. I hate having to like come up with stuff like if there's a silence in an interaction. But I mean, I've had some that just didn't work out. Like I haven't even put them out. I did one with comedian Brian Holtzman. He's a genius comedian. He is a legend of late night like comedy at the Comedy Store. It was a real honor to have him say, "Sure, let's do the show." I'm like, "Oh, amazing!" And I call him for the interview, and he's driving. And I'm like, "Hey, you want me to call you at another time?" He's like, "No, this is good. Go for it." I'm like, "Okay." And I keep asking him questions. He can't hear me, and he pulls over, and he's like on his phone outside, and I don't know why he decided this, but he pulled over into like a dumpster area. So it's just dump trucks passing by, beeping, beep, beep. I'm just like, "Hey, Brian, how about we just do this another time, dude?" That'd be fine. I'm good with it. Like, I love you. This is an honor, but holy shit.
This is it's
Yeah.
total garbage next to the dumpsters.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely the worst of the ones. And then, you know, I mean, one that I'm still working on is DJ Lethal. I mean, when I got the opportunity to hang out with him, as I mentioned earlier, it was to do a podcast, and we did record a bunch of stuff, but it was a really interesting situation because I showed up and I expected it to be like everything else I've done with other musicians, where I show up and we sit down and we do the podcast.
and then you can hang out afterwards. But
sure, yeah. So I get there and there's like a band making music. I'm not gonna. Oh, you guys go ahead, do your thing. And I sit down and chill, and then he comes out and we're chilling and hanging out, smoking. He's like, we'll get to it. Like, all right. And I just hung out, and eventually we sat down and recorded a little bit. And then halfway through, he's like, let's get in my car and let's go drive around. I'll show you some cool shit. And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And I filmed everything and tried to record everything with my little recorder. But I still don't have like a full episode to put together.
It's hard to piece that together.
Yeah, so now I'm trying to coordinate with him to do another like, let's get together for 30 minutes and get an interview in, and then I could piece all this stuff together and make a cool, special edition episode or something. Which is, that's ultimately my goal with the show, is I want to make a TV show. And
that'd be badass.
I have a pilot. I filmed a pilot with
Really?
Alexis from Three Teeth, and we went to Phantom Carriage Brewing. And the concept was real simple. Just, I meet up with Alex at the brewery. We go inside and meet up with the owner, and get some cool shots of the brewery, get some shots of the beer pouring and the atmosphere and whatnot. And then we have the podcast, but on camera while we're drinking. And it was the pilot came out well, and we were selling it to, not selling it, but we were pitching it to Food Network, and they were kind of interested. And then all of a sudden, pandemic hit. So now all that's on hold, and I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Which is exactly where I was going with. Which was going to be, how much has it changed for the RRBG podcast throughout the pandemic?
It's changed everything. As it used to just be audio, like now having the video component, now I feel an obligation that it needs to be video now, and I need to up the quality, and it's making me invest more into it. Like, all right, I need the right technology. I need better computer and better mics, and I need so it's made me kind of get my shit together, really. And now I'm just trying to figure out the balance of, since we're doing it this way, it seems easier now to book more shows, and I'm still trying to find that balance of whether I've recorded too many episodes or I don't have enough episodes. And and then sometimes I'm like, well, now I'm gonna have to start releasing them 2 a week, because otherwise we're gonna be talking about stuff that's 2 months old. Like it's weird.
I always try to keep that evergreen questions.
Yeah. I'm not good at that. I'm actually, I'm honestly surprised at the success of the show, because I do prep. Like, I have notes for you right now in front of me, but I also don't want to make it sound like every interview that you've done. Like, I go out of my way to sit there a couple days before the interview to try and listen to other people's interviews and try not to ask those questions, because I get it. It's the fucking press cycle. You put an album out and you're doing 100 of these, and you're saying the same answer to all of them, and very few people make an effort to kind of dig deeper, or to have a conversation, or to just be kind of have a flow to it. And I try. That's my ambition for the show. It's like, I want that, because in my experience, the best moments I've had in my life are with musicians backstage at a show, hanging out, having a drink. You know what I mean? The show is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm a fan. I want to see you guys perform. That's great. But the after hangs, to me, that's where it's at. That's where you get to know a person. That's where you get to, and that to me is the most important factor for longevity in a fan, is like being able to connect on that level. I get the how can I explain this? When I can make them my friends, I want to support them more. If
Oh
that
yeah.
makes, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So if it's like, oh, that band's cool, but I don't know them, and maybe I won't buy the vinyl because I'm kind of short on cash. But if my buddies put out a new record, I'm buying that record that day to support them. So it's a super important part, and it's not like I wasn't the band that I was in didn't reach some kind of level that gives me this access, because I get that question a lot, like, how do you know these people? I go to their shows and then I approach them. That's it. That's all
Yeah.
I did. It's not that
You don't
my
have the
band,
Rolodex.
right? My band wasn't so like, yeah. We opened up. We did some really good shows. We opened up for Static X. We opened up for Deicide. We opened up for Biohazard and Animals as Leaders and Thrice. Like, we have some shows that we opened up, but we weren't. It wasn't. We were just the opening locals. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't. We weren't homies. But when you see a person there, you go and you talk to them and
Being a human.
yeah, like a human. Hey, what's up? How are you?
Yeah.
Great. Cool. You want a beer, a drink? You want something? Can I get you something? No. That's it. And I try to express that to people as much as possible. Sometimes there is a balance between punishing,
Oh yeah.
and and being a punisher is rough. And I know for a fact that I've definitely come off that way to some people, like to some musicians that I've approached. But sometimes who knows? Maybe I punish unintentionally. I know for sure I froze in front of Adam Jones of Tool.
I would too, probably.
like I'm pretty cool with everybody I meet, but when I met Adam Jones, I froze. It was beyond my control. Like, I just kind of like, oh shit, and it was one of those moments, like, oh no, and then eventually, like, my wife pulled me aside. She's like, hey, relax. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And I went back in and had a conversation with him, but it was that's just got to find that balance, and that was the idea for my other show that I was going to do. I had another show that I was going to do pre-pandemic at the Comedy Store called Punisher Patrols.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and it was just going to be me and my buddy Johnny. We're going to talk to musicians, actors, whoever has been, and have them share stories of being punished.
They're Punisher stories.
Punisher stories. And also, like, if they've punished somebody too,
Yeah, because it happens, right?
Yeah, and then also it would be like multiple segments. It would be stories of punishing and who you've punished, then like a Punisher 101 segment where we would go over things like, hey, right when you're about to approach your favorite guitar player with that burnt CD with the Sharpie, don't do it. Don't do that. Hey man, you gotta listen to my band. And like, no, relax.
If your favorite star is in the bathroom next to you,
yeah,
don't talk to them.
Don't look at their dicks. It doesn't work.
I love it. That initial list that your wife had you create of your 5 top guests, how many are left on that list?
There's still a few, unfortunately. I'm afraid that I might never get to them, but just because they're in the stratosphere. But it's Trent Reznor, obviously, is number one on that list for me, just because he's the reason I make music, or I started making music, basically. So Trent Reznor is up there. Maynard James Keenan is up there. Chino Moreno of the Deftones is up there, and it was Braun from Mastodon, and I have Elon Musk on there, but that's not going to have any.
That's a strong list. I like it. I agree with a lot of those. Let's wrap this up with a classic Vox and Hops wrap-up question. It probably never happens to you because we're craft beer elitists. And we know how to do this, but every now and then it happens to everyone. What is your hangover cure?
Ooh. So my hangover cure actually starts while drinking.
Which is a brilliant way.
Yeah, as a trained professional for 8 years at Cigar City Brewing, Brown Distributing, Modern Times Beer, all these breweries I've worked for, I've learned to pick up tricks. There's charcoal tablets during your drinking sessions. There's making sure you drink 1 glass of water every 2 beers. It's probably should be more than that, but that's my ratio. So a glass of water every 2 beers, and then in the morning when I wake up, no questions asked. Actually, sorry, my bad. right before bed, 2 ibuprofens with some water. And then when you wake up in the morning, you have a disgusting breakfast. Something really gross. Eggs, bacon, or some kind of breakfast burrito, huevos rancheros. And it's followed up by awful bathroom visits. But you get it all out. It's like a detox. You go and you eat all that awful food, and you go to the bathroom and get it all out of you, including the alcohol, and you wake up like nothing. You go work out.
Ladies and gentlemen, the master has spoken. The ultimate hangover cure. I love it. And prevention and curing one.
Prevention is the key, guys. If you have a hangover and you did nothing beforehand, it's too late.
You're fucked.
It's too late. You're gonna drink water all day and feel like shit all day. That's just what's gonna happen.
Oh, Eddie, thank you so much for taking the time talking to me about your life, talking about some music, talking a lot about craft beer and podcasting. This was a true pleasure. Everybody, please get ready for part 2 of this, which is going to be on the RRBG podcast, where we flip the switch and Eddie's going to interview me, which I'm super stoked. Thank you, Eddie. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thank you so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. Man, did Eddie have me laughing. Man, I don't think I've laughed this much during an episode in a long time. I had a blast, but it's not over. There is a part 2 where we flip the switch and Eddie starts asking me some questions, and you can go listen to that right now via the link in the description of this podcast, or you can just simply search for the RRBG podcast on the podcast platform of your choice and listen to the second part of this episode. I had a blast connecting with Eddie. We have so much in common. He is hilarious. He's spoken to some amazing people in the world of beer and metal. I am stoked that I had a chance to connect with him. I know that we're going to do more things together because we just hit it off, and we've been communicating since then. I'm very stoked to have met you, Eddie. If you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should sign up to the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast mailing list. You can do that on my website, VOX&HOPS.com. That's VOXANDHOPS.com. And when you do that, you shall receive 1 email a week containing all of the details of everything that has happened throughout the past week in the world of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, including all of the details for any episodes which I've dropped, if I have been a guest on someone else's podcast, as well as the updated links to the live interview Thirsty Thursday virtual hangs, which I am announcing right now. Next Thursday is with Ken Sorceron of Abigail Williams. Ken is always a blast, and I'm very excited to talk to him because I know he's got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm stoked to ask him about that. You will also get the links to the Brutal Awakenings playlist, which is curated by my man Jerry Monk, the metal architect himself, and is available on both Apple Music and Spotify. Do yourself a favor, sign up to the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast's mailing list, because I don't want you to miss a single thing. The Vox and Hops Metal Podcast is brought to you by Sound Talent Media. I will be back next week with 2 episodes, but until then, please try to relax, enjoy your weekend, and remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.